I had my annual physical every August. This year it was conducted by a new doctor. My old doctor retired. The new doctor was a young woman, Marion Wellner. She is red-haired, in her early 30s. I didn't really want her to do the examination. Part of it was the intimate physical contact, and I thought about embarrassment. Dr. Wellner's nurse did many preliminary procedures, such as taking blood pressure and ECG, and testing my ability to remember a book, an apple, a table after a few minutes. I was always worried about this. But this time, I was worried about being practically naked in front of a young woman, an attractive young woman. But I didn't need to worry. I was so nervous that there was no chance of arousal. When we finished with this part, she smiled and said, "Well, I'm sure you're glad it's all over." "Yes. Glad. Thank you." I smiled back at her. The remainder of the examination was routine. The blood work was excellent and everything checked out. When we were about to leave, she asked, "Do you have 3 children?" "Yes. 2 boys and a girl." "Have you adopted a child?" "No. Eco." "But why are you asking?" She blushed. "Well, I'm new and I looked through all your notes before this meeting." "About you? Well, it doesn't matter. Thank you for being so quick." She waved her hands. "You must explain yourself, doctor. This is my body." "Mr. Miller, you have a disease. You have been infertile since birth. Mr. Miller is Ted Miller." "About... Nobody told you about this?" "No, please make copies of all my medical records." Now I was as shocked as can be. "Certainly." "Sorry. I should have remained silent." "No, not at all. Apparently too many people were silent." About 30 minutes later, I received the notes. Meanwhile, I was thinking about this. I'm 48. I've been married 26 years to Melissa. We have 3 children. Brad, 24 years old, Mary, 22 years old, and William, 20 years old. At least I thought we had 3 children. Brad is married with a son on the way. Mary has just graduated from college, and William is a junior. I wondered who their real father was, but after thinking about it, I found that I was not convinced by Dr. Wellner's words. All 3 looked like me, partly. When the notes arrived, I took them to my office and scanned them. I considered various possibilities to verify what she told me. I called a college friend of mine who was a doctor in New York. He called me back an hour later. "This is Mark Madden, urologist." "Close enough." I said, "Hi, Mark. I need some advice." But without personal appearance, and strict confidentiality is required. "Tell me about it," I told you. "Send me the notes by email and I'll look at them this afternoon." "Done, and please send the bill. The service is done quickly." He called back at 3:30. "Ted, at birth, you had a disease that led to infertility. I'm guessing you didn't do anything about it." "I didn't know about this." "Well then, when you were born and you were diagnosed, nothing could be done. Over the past 10 years, we have developed a method of helping. Can you send me a textbook on this subject, Mark?" "Certainly. I'll send you an email in 10 minutes. Good luck." "Thank you." "Hey, Ted, don't you have kids?" "Eat." Well, that's what I thought. Oh, I see. Good luck." I hung up and called the DNA lab. I agreed that they would send me several sets on the same day. They arrived at 5 o'clock. I put them in my briefcase and went home. My youngest, William, was still at school and was due to leave next week. After some thought, I decided that it was enough to test one of the children. When I arrived, Will was at home, reading in the living room. Melissa was cooking. She usually returns early from work selling real estate through an agency owned by my older brother, Robert. I smelled fish. Her cooking, that is. The 3 of us ate crusty cod and salad. Good food. I think Mel noticed my reticence, but Will probably didn't. Mel is also 48. She hasn't gained a pound since college, where we met. She has dark brown hair and eyes like mine. Her height is 1.70 meters. Her weight is 59 kilograms. She is quite pretty. While Mel and I were cleaning up, I picked up the glass that Will had used at dinner. Later, I took it upstairs and cleaned the rim with a swab I had. Then I went into Will's room and took a few hairs from his brush. and I swabbed the neckline of a t-shirt in his dirty clothes basket, and also his sneakers. I also took a swab from the inside of my cheek, sealed everything in envelopes, and put them in a briefcase. That evening, Will left, and when he left, Mel asked me, "What's happening to you, Ted? You're lethargic. Passed a medical examination? Something happened?" "No. Healthy as always." He was probably nervous about the new doctor. "How is she?" "Good, pretty. I was nervous, you know." She laughed. Her laugh is contagious. "You haven't gotten up, huh?" "No. I was too nervous about this." "Well, I'll see her next week, and I'll ask. Just to check." To her. I left. That evening she wanted sex, and I told her that I didn't really want it. She accepted it with dignity. The fact that I refused her was unusual. The next day I took the DNA samples to the laboratory myself. I paid for a quick analysis. They told me they would have something by Friday, 2 days later. I went to work. I work as a lawyer at an investment bank. Essentially, I manage an in-house team of 6 other lawyers. We are located in Washington, close to regulatory authorities. I have been doing this work for 22 years, and I earn very well. I also have stock options that, if cashed out, would be worth a pretty penny. I admit that I was distracted at work. However, what needed to be done was done. I rode my bike to work and rode my bike back. The exercise, I thought, would calm me down. When I arrived at 6, Mel was not at home. She left a note saying there were sandwiches and salad in the refrigerator. She was going to a play and then perhaps a bachelorette party. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it. She did both with some regularity, but now there is no trust. I ran the location finder on her phone. She wasn't in a nightclub. She was at a motel near the Fairfax line. I ate and talked a little with Will about college. He was looking forward to this. The summer went well for him. He worked in a bicycle repair shop and earned decent money. But he broke up with his girlfriend Lisa and was a little depressed. I went to bed early. Mel arrived at 11 and was in bed soon after. No shower. But she pulled away a little when I tried to press against her. I did this to see her reaction. I knew she was cheating. I just didn't know with whom. And he had no intention of trying to have sex with her. The next day, I got up early and rode my bike to work again. There, I took a shower and immediately got to work. It was a busy morning. At 1 o'clock, I received a call from the DNA laboratory. They emailed me the report. But on the phone, the technician said that Will's samples belonged to my nephew. I almost fainted. I have only one brother, Robert. He is 3 years older than me. He helped me throughout my childhood. He and I were about the same height, 183 meters and average build. He was a good athlete at school and played basketball at university. He was not a star, but he played. He finished school and started selling real estate. He succeeded in this and opened his own company. He married Glenda Wilson, his college sweetheart, and they had 3 children. All 3 had graduated from college and were working. About 4 years ago, Melissa joined his firm. Before that, she worked as a teacher. I made good money, and she didn't have to work. But Will was already old enough to take care of himself after school, and she wanted something more interesting. At least that's what she said. Now, I absolutely did not believe anything she said. After receiving the news about DNA, I sat and wondered what could have happened. All 3 of my children had birthdays at the end of September. The countdown I got was around Christmas. When Mel and I decided to have children, she stopped taking birth control pills. We tried for months before last Christmas before Brad came along. At Christmas, there was a big family gathering as usual, and Rob was there with his family. And I remembered that after Christmas that year and many subsequent years, Mel and her friend Linda Green went on a week-long meditation retreat. They left on Boxing Day, the 2nd day of Christmas, and returned on New Year's Day. Some years they stayed an extra week. The seminar was supposed to take place at one of the centers in the mountains of West Virginia. When Brad showed up, Mel didn't go the next year. But I went again the next time. Mary appeared the following September. There was no workshop when Mary was breastfeeding, but when she was 15 months old, Mel and Linda went again. Will arrived the following September. The traveling seminars continued for several years. I thought about it. They stopped when Mel went to work for Rob. Linda Green had been Mel's best friend since college. She got a job at Rob's new company when he opened it. So, the three of them worked together, and that was the case for a while. The next weekend, we took Will back to college. I rented a minibus and we had a nice 2-hour drive on Saturday. Had lunch with Will and helped him move into the apartment he shared with his good friend, Mike Watson. After that, Mel and I waved goodbye to them and left. I admit, when we were alone, I behaved quietly. Eventually, Mel noticed it. She said, "What? You didn't even say 2 words to me." She looked worried. "I have a lot to worry about, Mel. So many. This is not what I'm going to discuss now." So, secret. Ted, you're not lying about the physical exam, are you? No, leave it alone, Mel. This is my best advice at the moment. For the rest of the trip, about an hour, we talked about almost nothing. I dropped her off and returned to the van, after which he went to a local bar and drank beer. I thought about it some more. I couldn't understand how Mel had undergone any medical procedure to get pregnant with Rob's child. This meant only one thing. They had sex, repeatedly and for many years. Perhaps it was Rob that Mel met at the motel. Sitting at the bar, I was angrier than ever. You know what they say about the red color in the eyes? It seemed to me that this was so. Everything I looked at had a strange hue. I scared the bar manager, a young woman. In the end, he threw a 10 on the counter and left. I had several friends with whom I played cards and tennis. My closest friend was Ned Bart. I went to his house. She and Mel never got along. His wife Sadie was not close to Mel at all. Their children also left for college. So when I rang the bell, Sadie answered. Ned was nearby. They immediately saw that I was out of shape. Ned has a small gym in his backyard garage. I said, "I need to use Calm Ned." Ned and I practiced self-defense at a small gym near our house. I knew he had a bag because I worked with him once a week. Certainly. He and I went out into the backyard. I put on gloves and attacked his heavy bag as if my life depended on its bursting. Ned watched silently. After the initial frenzy, I began to act more systematically. I kept hitting and hitting until I fell. Ned picked me up and helped me walk to his house. I fell onto a lounge chair on his terrace. Sadie brought me some water. Having come to my senses a little, I began to sob. Ned asked, "Is someone dead or injured?" "No, not yet." My son turned into a growl. These two were smart enough to leave me alone. 10 minutes later, Ned brought the beer. Sadie sat down next to me. She said, "Now that you've done all this, you have to tell us." I made them promise to remain silent and told them everything. Both were shocked. Ned said, "How? I mean, without telling you. And your parents should have known." I thought about it. The medical record when I was a child laid out everything about the condition. They knew. Sadie asked, "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea. Don't take it to heart. Please don't lose it like you did with the bag. Prison is not a good place." "I won't. I think I'd better go home. She'll be worried and I want to avoid confrontation. For now." I drove back to my house. Mel stood at the door. "Where have you been?" I worried so much. Stopped for a beer and met Ned. I went to his house to do some work carrying sacks. Sorry, I should have called. I got in the shower and we had dinner. On Sunday, we went for a picnic to a local park and went rollerblading. But we didn't have sex on any of the nights. On Sunday, Mel looked disappointed and confused. I got up early and left for work without whacking her. I made an appointment with a lawyer in a nearby building and went to our bank. I also visited my company's HR department to change the direct deposit and beneficiary of my retirement account. This was not easy. A lawyer let me know about a divorce in our state. But she, Millie Stanton, also said that my wife and brother cheated on me. Maybe this will be useful to me. I asked her to file a divorce petition with alternative grounds. But don't let her give it to Mel until I give the go-ahead. That evening, I installed tracking software on Mel's cell phone. She was on my phone plan, and I could receive her messages and the numbers she called. I also threw 3 small voice recorders into my house, in the kitchen, bedroom, and living room. One went into her car. I asked Mel to set up a party at my house with Rob and Glenda on Friday night. On Monday and Tuesday, I stayed late at work, telling Mel that I had something important to take care of. On Wednesday, I returned home on time. We had a nice dinner and I put on a good face, but there was no sex. Mel was clearly disappointed. Later, I downloaded all the materials from the recorders and checked her phone. When Mel went to bed, I listened. There weren't many entries. During the day, no one was home, and Mel didn't talk to herself. She made one call to Rob's cell phone and one to my mom. 5 years earlier, my mother was widowed. She was 78 and lived 30 minutes from where I grew up. The bell rang first. I heard Mel's voice. "Mom, have you heard anything about Tim lately?" "Well, he seems to be out of his mind. He had a physical and hasn't been himself ever since." "Don't know. Just checking." "Okay." The next call was to Rob. "Rob, this is Mel. No, we can't do it this week. You guys will arrive on Friday. And Tim is acting strange." "Don't know. I don't see any chance of him finding out anything." "Look, we're being careful. And either way, I think he got some bad news from the physical." "Okay, see you, baby." The essence of this conversation was the actual end of my marriage. They are still together. It occurred to me that at first they might have thought they were doing me a favor. But in reality, no matter what they think, I'm going to punish them as best I can. Rob and Glenda arrived at 6:30 on Friday. Mel and I made food, grilled hamburgers and fries, salad. While we were doing this, I studiously ignored Mel. She noticed this, but didn't say anything. When the doorbell rang, she looked at me and said, "I hope, Tim, you're not going to be in a bad mood all evening." I didn't say anything and opened the door. Rob and Glenda greeted me. Glenda hugged me. Rob tried to do the same, but I turned away. I bought them drinks. Beer for Rob, white wine for Glenda. We sat on the terrace, all four of us. I said, "I'm divorcing you, Mel. On Monday, you will be served with a divorce petition. Rob, I'm suing you for child support for all the years I raised and paid for your children." Mel began to sob. Rob jumped up and stood over me. "You're an idiot. Jerk. I'll kill you now." Glenda watched. Rob tried to hit me while I was sitting on a chair on the porch. I stumbled back, away from him, and turned over in my chair. And then he stood up and said, "Are you angry? You are a hypocritical asshole. Let's do it." He growled and attacked me, swinging. I ducked under his fist and punched him in the gut. He wasn't as strong as me. The blow took his breath away. Doesn't matter. I hit him in the stomach again. I didn't hear Mel scream. I continued to hit Rob until he fell onto my shoulder. Then I kneed him in the groin and threw him onto the terrace. I turned around. Glenda stood up, but looked only at Mel, who rushed to Rob. He was conscious and moaning. Mel looked up at me. "You had no reason to hurt Rob." "None. You are a savage. You could have killed him." She was still sobbing. "And I still can. And you're not safe either. You're a sneaky bitch." Mel turned white at my threat. She slowly backed away from Rob. I growled at her. "Pick up this piece of shit and get him out of my sight. You only have a minute before I finish him off completely." Mel tried to pick Rob up. She found it difficult to cope with his dead weight. She looked at Glenda and said, "Help me with him, Glenda." Glenda came to her senses a little. She simply said, "No, you two are on your own. I agree that you are a bitch." Mel pulled Rob onto the couch on the patio. She picked him up and, staggering, disappeared into the kitchen. I looked at Glenda. "So you didn't know?" No. I've had some suspicions about Rob over the years, but not with Mel. I think they are still together. Maybe she has sex with other guys, I don't know." I heard the garage door go up. I walked inside and looked out the front door. Mel put Rob in the passenger seat of her SUV and drove away. Glenda came inside. This is a pleasant-looking woman, blonde, 46 years old. She was well-dressed for the dinner party, but she was crying and her makeup didn't look very good. I looked at her. "More wine?" "No, can't you explain all this to me? I did it." She was sitting at the kitchen table. When I got to the after-Christmas workshops, Glenda said, Rob always went on winter ski trips. I hate skiing and stayed home with Mark. Mark was her son. I said, I wonder where they really went. Who cares? This is all too much for me. Sorry, Glenda, I thought you knew. Are you getting a divorce for real? Certainly. Never doubted it. I told Glenda she could stay overnight in the guest room. She agreed. Then we started talking about the past, about when and where Rob and Mel might meet now. I showed her the recording of Mel's call to Rob. She left no doubt that their romance continues to this day. At 10 o'clock, we ate hamburgers. We talked a little more about practical things, like where we would all live. I had a waiting list for an apartment near my work. I assumed that Mel and I would split the money, including the proceeds from the house. For now, I'll stay here. Glenda decided to go upstairs and go to bed. I followed her to see how the guest room was doing. She was ready. I brought her a towel and a toothbrush. When he left, she said, I've always liked you, Tim. I never liked Mel. She thought I was on some lower level. I think now I know why. I waved to her and closed the door. The next morning, I was already on my feet. The police didn't come for me. I guessed that neither Rob nor Mel wanted publicity. I asked Glenda what she was going to do. She said she would go to her mother until Rob vacated their house. I gave her my lawyer's email address and told her to contact her for clarification. Her car was still there. I asked if she would like me to accompany her to pick up more of her things. She agreed. Then I took a pistol out of my gun safe and followed her car to their house. Mel's car was not there. Glenda and I went inside. There was no one there. I started to think how badly I had hurt this asshole. He hoped that he was admitted to some low-grade hospital, where he would contract an infection caused by the bacterium Clostridium difficile and die of dehydration, or something like that. Glenda sat down. She said, I wonder where they are. Let me check. I started the phone locator again. I wondered why Mel didn't notice this the first time. This time her phone was at Cambria Hospital. I called the hospital and asked if Rob was there. They told me that he had arrived. I reported this to Glenda. She decided to stay at her home and change the locks. So I went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of new hardware. Some for her, some for me. I spent the morning installing it, I gave her the keys and left her there. But I felt sorry for her, and I said that I would like to return. She agreed. She said she would cook. I finished changing the locks on my house and made extra keys for me and Glenda. I returned home to her at 4 o'clock. When I entered the house, they called me on my mobile phone. It was Detective William James. He wanted to talk to me. I said, I'm at 204 Western Street. Mrs. Glenda Miller is here too. Is she the second witness? The victim's wife? He wasn't a victim, Detective. And yes, that's her. Will you come? I can be there in 15 minutes. He was an African-American man with a fair complexion, short and broad. He was wearing a nice suit and expensive moccasins. Glenda let him in the front door and he introduced himself. Then he asked, Are you two comfortable? She answered, No, it is our spouses who cheat on us, not us. Then she looked at me. For now. She said it evenly, as if it was supposed to happen. James stared at her, then at me. He said, Maybe you'll get lucky, boy. I answered, Maybe. I looked at Glenda. She didn't look away. I thought that this was not the best approach to a police interrogation. James said, I'd like to talk to Mrs. Miller first. Glenda took him back to the back patio, and I saw him turn on the recorder on his phone. They talked for almost 20 minutes. Glenda then walked into the house and waved for me to go out onto the patio. As she passed by, she whispered, I mean this. Her open offer was a real red herring. I always liked her and liked her looks, but I wasn't the type to play pranks. But still. The detective said he was recording and asked me to tell him what happened. I started by finding out that my children were actually Rob's and that I only found out recently. Described dinner on Friday and his reaction. He also described our quarrel. I was as accurate as possible. When I finished, he asked, How did you know this? I do not want to discuss it. Suffice it to say that no one snitched on me. Everything happened by chance. Fine.